Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism training. So I'm really sorry. I had a bunch of technical issues with my laptop. I had a bunch of kind of baby interruption issues. So instead of kind of doing like one really long, thorough episode about your kind of herbalism learning journey, I've actually split the audio into three shows. The last one was focusing on the importance of like intimacy with plants and getting to know a few plants in a lot of detail and depth. And then I was also talking about the kind of DIY, like follow your passion approach of sort of self-foraging, different kind of free sources of information. And then finally talking about like experimentation and the kind of importance of practical skills and medicine making. This episode, I'm going to be talking about kind of learning styles. I go off on a side tangent about learning styles, but really knowing yourself in depth so that you can decide the right kind of clinical training for you if that's your herbalism pathway. And that isn't just big programs, that's also kind of smaller online programs, and I'm going to talk about some of the main ones in the so-called UK and also some in the US that I've done as well. And then, the next episode is going to be talking about kind of mentoring and finding people to learn from that you feel affinity with, and also this kind of like continual professional development stuff, like how to kind of, integrate herbs into your sort of lifelong learning journey and designing your learning pathway. So I hope this episode is useful. I do like say a couple of disclaimers in there of like, please, for every school I've mentioned, please speak to graduates who know it well, read the website, read the prospectuses, talk to the tutors. Like, I don't want anyone to make their learning decisions based on what I've said and the tiny snippets of information I've got. And I definitely don't want to misrepresent any kind of programs of learning. Like, I would be upset if someone did that about my PTSD course, right? So take what I say with a pinch of salt. I have met a lot of students and graduates into different programs, and I'm trying to be kind of like tactful and talk about their strengths and weaknesses. But anyway, please like do your thorough research into all the options and speak to people with lived experience of a course, because they're the best people to talk to. Okay, thanks so much. And just shameless reminder, the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course is still open for enrollment. I'm in this kind of like launch period where I'm just promoting it the best I can. Please share it with your friends and your networks and your herbal Facebook groups and your communities. Anyone you know that will benefit from learning about herbalism, from learning about trauma and the politics of trauma. Just, point them in my direction. I would really, really appreciate that. As you know, I'm like a kind of one-woman show at the moment, and obviously I organize and have a massive network of people around the world that I'm in relationship with, but I just mean in the sense that it's really, really hard with the baby to get a lot done. I'm just, this is my kind of livelihood, and this is how I fund all of the work with the apothecary, all of the prisoners' herbal books, all of the care packages. It like subsidizes me to support people one-to-one and do like all the other millions of things. So I just really, really, really appreciate your solidarity in sharing the course. All right. Let me know what you think of this episode or this little series about learning herbalism. Okay. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye. All right. So now I'm going to talk about more sort of structured clinical training, or I guess it doesn't have to be clinical training, but I'm going to talk about kind of structured learning. And I mean that in the sense that like someone else has structured it. So you're kind of able to like sink into someone else's system. Like they've organized the information, they've put things into modules or lessons, into sort of thematic topics. And you can work through those like either in a sort of linear way or in a way like the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course, where you can kind of like bounce around and kind of follow your interest, but there's still like that structure there. So I think this is the main question I get a lot about my clinical training. But I think before I talk about some of the different options, like I think any successful kind of course of learning, it really demands that you know yourself and your needs and your learning style and also your nervous system, in my opinion. So
when I did my, I just did AS levels at college before I I just couldn't do it anymore. I had lots of stuff going on and it wasn't fulfilling me. I remember doing a assessment, which was looking at your learning style, and it was quite reductionist. So it was only 20 questions. It's not strong science or anything, but 19 out of 20 of these questions, I got concrete sequential learner, which means I need tangible things that are very concrete and practical in a sort of sequence. So yeah, maybe that's why I like things like spreadsheets and bullet points. People will be very interested of how I organize information. My partner wants to write a book about addiction and sort of, class and poverty and stuff around, how people who use drugs are so dehumanized and stuff, but that's kind of sort of autobiographical. And he's really struggled to organize that content into any sort of framework or chapters. And, we literally went for coffees before the baby came along. And within half an hour, we'd outlined his book. And he was just I haven't been able to do that ever. And, he's got ADHD. So he's got his own sort of neurodiversity. But for me, I'm so sort of sequenced. You're probably laughing at this, being no, Nicole, you're bouncing around all over the place on this podcast. But for me, I really struggle with for example, super waffly teachers or really abstract things. I had an ex who got a degree in philosophy, and I was just yeah, I'm just not getting this. I'm not interested. And it's not that I'm not interested, but yeah, for me, it's why are we thinking about this when this and this needs doing, or the fucking washing up needs doing, or do you know what I mean? So anyway, I think know your learning style. And I know that models of learning styles are sort of a little bit outdated, and they also can be a bit reductionist. We can think that we're one thing and actually maybe we're not, or maybe that's a limiting kind of belief or mindset that we've got. So yeah, for example, I know for me that I'm hyper visual. I love graphs and pictures and frameworks and systems and structures. And I really struggle with long form kind of essay type content. I enrolled in this foot health course because I really want to develop my foot health skills for Calais, and I should have asked more questions before buying just the theoretical side of the course. But it's all assignments and loads of reading, but proper academic essays. And, I studied with a plant medicine school, and we did have to write, fucking 1,000,001 assignments, but it wasn't and you needed to reference things, but it wasn't that kind of hardcore academia where there's you get marked down if you haven't put it in the right format or something. So I was just oh God, what have I got myself into? Because the courses that suit my learning styles the most are ones where I can watch videos, I can watch, I can look at people's wonderful PowerPoints and slides. There's this, oh God, my brain. I think it's even just botanicalmedicine.org, but it's more focused on sort of naturopath types, but they've got loads of herbal medicine content. And I did their, they call it substance use disorder series, but it was just about kind of herbs and harm reduction and recovery from opiate use and stuff because of what me and what my partner was going through. And I love their format because you can watch the videos, but you can also download the slides, which is perfect for me because then I can annotate them or refer back to them, because you're never going to remember this information, right? It's going to go in, but I have a whole Google Drive of all of my clinical training documents that I constantly scan and return to, because the brain can only hold so much information, especially when you have a new baby. So, you need to have some external place where that information is stored that you can revisit. There's just too much for our brains, in my opinion. Obviously, you do absorb a lot, especially if you're working with herbalism all the time. When I was seeing clients after my clinical training, one-to-one support for people, it was just constantly on the tip of my tongue. But now I'm a bit my brain, I need to check that. So yeah, anyway, this is a long rant about learning styles, but choose the format that will work for you, because everyone is different. Like my friend Kez, for example, who's amazing trans femme, who's written all these like amazing books. Like she's just like, Nicole, I fucking hate Instagram because I hate pictures. But she loves text, right? So she edited my Herbalism and State Violence book, and we did it all on like Google Docs, and she would go through and edit. But like that's her. She just loves like written format, and for me it just doesn't work. So yeah, just know your learning style. So if I'm going to enroll in online courses, I'm always like, how high quality are their learning materials? Am I just watching people talk, or do they have PowerPoints? Do they have handouts? Can I listen on the move, for example? Like some people are very like what they call like kinesthetic learners. So they want that practical hands-on thing, which I've talked about with herbalism. And I think herbalism attracts a lot of people that want those sort of like tangible skills or kind of like crafty skills. But sometimes it's actually that you just need to move your body. So like I will listen a lot while I go for a long walk every day with Lee in the pram, and I listen to podcasts or, you know, online courses I've enrolled in or something. And like that just helps me integrate that information, because my nickname as a kid was Fidget, because I couldn't sort of sit still and just be forced to listen to a teacher, for example. So yeah, choose a course that is gonna suit your learning style. Likewise, like some people are not self-structured in the sense that they will feel overwhelmed, they don't know where to start, they will get sort of lost, and they need like either some sort of group component or like group accountability, or they need like deadlines and external structures in order to kind of force them to do something. So, you know, like I've had the odd person enroll in the Herbalism PTSD course, and they email me and they're like, actually, this isn't going to work for me and my brain, because they need like a group to, you know, to cheer them on, to check in with them, to feel like accountable to. Whereas like I'm actually quite the opposite of, I really don't. Yeah, like I kind of struggle with like that kind of like enforced socializing, if that makes sense. Like if I'm in a room and I'm at a course, like I'll always be sociable and friendly. Like I'm very extroverted, but in the sense of like learning in order to focus, I think probably because of a trauma thing of like constantly scanning everyone's stuff, all of their fucking feelings, what nervous system state they're in, I find like group environments very difficult energetically. If I'm in a class, I will be, you know, just feeling a bit unsafe, if I'm honest, in the sense of like, not that I'm actually physically unsafe, but that my nervous system is activated by everyone around me. And for some people, they need that to learn, and they bounce off everyone's ideas and their excitement and their energy. Whereas I think for me, to really absorb something, I have to like actually really be alone. And maybe that's like an Aquarius like air sign thing. But yeah, just really, before you enroll in a course, just really think about what suits you. In terms of that, there's also a thing around kind of like pacing, right? So some courses are like 3-year degree programs where it's really high pressure, a lot of deadlines, like, and often a lot of fucking burnout, if I'm honest, that I witness. And other courses, it is a part-time thing, and you can kind of go at your own pace. Again, everyone is so different, which is why like real self-reflection about this is important, because some people, it's like, I don't know if people have heard of like Parkinson's law, where it's like an activity will expand to the time you've got available. So if you've got half an hour to get ready, it will take you half an hour. If you've got an hour and a half, it could potentially take you an hour and a half. If you've got 10 minutes because you overslept, you've got 10 minutes. Does that make sense? So I think there's like a strong, humans are just like very good at potentially taking longer than they need, or yeah. And so I think like when there isn't a deadline, or there isn't like a kind of, you know, like for me with my clinical training, there was like this kind of like external driver of like, I really wanted to be a herbalist. Like I was so desperate to kind of graduate and crack on with it. And I really didn't enjoy my job at the time. Like I was working part-time for this thing called Corporate Watch, and like it was really to a really fantastic crew, but like it was so poorly paid, and I was like researching stuff around prison, and it was like worsening my PTSD like every single day. But like I think because of my criminal record and stuff from my childhood, like I have a perception of like, oh, I'm not going to get a job anywhere. And, you know, I live like quite rurally and stuff. And like my politics is like difficult to, you know, like when I used to do care work and stuff, you need like a... I'm so sorry. My Audacity software that I record podcasts on keeps crashing, so I'm a little bit stop-start. But yeah, what I was basically saying is that sometimes we need sort of speed to, you know, to complete something, and people need like deadlines to focus and structure themselves and their work. Sometimes you have like some sort of economic pressure. Like, for example, I was saying about I just had to fucking leave my job. Like I was so sick of it. I was researching about prisons and doing a lot of research and writing work, which is a kind of like learned strength, but it's not like my like natural flowy strength, if that makes sense. And yeah, just constantly interacting with prison, which was just harming my mental health so much. And it was like so poorly paid, and I just was going nowhere. So for me, herbalism felt like this really sort of expansive opportunity, and I just couldn't sort of wait to be kind of quote unquote qualified to practice. So yeah, so basically, before I dive into like some of the courses that are available, I think like knowing your learning style is so important. And I also mentioned the importance of your nervous system, and embracing a huge body of learning is like can be very stressful. It can also be fucking wonderful. Like I had a friend stay who'd been training with Heartwood, who I'll talk about later, and they were like, oh, you know, like which part of your training did you like not enjoy? And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, you know, like which bit did you hate? Like, and I was like, oh, like actually I loved like all the topics. Like I couldn't, like I loved the anatomy and physiology and the pathology stuff and learning about health and disease. Like I loved learning about plants. I loved, you know, like the prescribing stuff. Like, and I was just like a bit stumped of like, oh, I actually can't think of what I didn't like. Like I absolutely loved it. Like I used to get up at 5 a.m. and work on things, and you know, like I would just literally spend every spare second I could doing my course and learning and self-educating, and you know, I was kind of in my element, if that makes sense, which is why I know that like herbalism is right for me. But I'm just saying that like if you kind of go down that route of like a big course, then like I think you need to know that you feel like resourced enough for it. Like I would love to do like further training. Like I would love to study like paramedic science, for example. Like I've done the first responder, like first response emergency care, like FREC 4 course, which is like, so I guess it's like a kind of EMT thing, emergency medicine technician, but we don't really have that framework in the UK. But like I would love to go down that route one day, for example, but I know like doing some sort of degree or big course of study, it's just like not compatible with a newborn baby and, you know, trying to have a livelihood and running the apothecary and stuff. So it's like, I know it's not the right moment right now. So I think like you have to know that, and it's not always the right time. Like sometimes you just have to like jump off a cliff and kind of go for it, if that makes sense. But I do think like, again, just the self-awareness is really important. And that's why I created the Herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress courses. Like it's very structured in the sense that there's clear modules, there's clear learning outcomes and aims. And like, I'm not a big waffler. Like the lessons are kind of as discreet as they can be while trying to go into depth. And there's big resource libraries, so you can kind of self-forage and complement what I'm sharing with you. But it is like a gift to the nervous system in the sense that there's no one like hounding you to submit an assignment or meet a deadline that you just like don't have the sort of nervous system capacity to do. Like there's no overwhelming kind of forums or group calls or, you know, so it's kind of like gentle and nourishing, and you can set your own pace. And for me, like, that was the only option I could think of where actually it could like support people's nervous systems and not harm them. Because I've seen, I think that's also why I dropped out of formal education as a kid, was like my nervous system was so smashed with having a partner in prison, having a best friend with cancer, moving out at 16, like having no money, like dealing with all this like childhood trauma stuff. Like, how the hell am I going to have the spoons and the resources to then, do some like massive degree that takes loads of time and energy and money, if that makes sense? So it's like choosing a mode of study that is like nourishing for you. And, maybe that's like enrolling in a year-long course where you can go once a month for a weekend and just go foraging, and you just want to be outside, you just want to be with people, you just want to be with plants, you don't want to read a fucking PDF, you just want to like do the outdoor thing. Like, maybe that's what your body needs right now. Or maybe you are like intellectually kind of hungry for that herbalism knowledge, and you really want to be a clinical herbalist, you really want to do it full time, in your bones it's your passion, and you do want to like go all in on a training program. And sometimes you just don't know, right? Sometimes you have to jump in and then be like, hey, this isn't working for me actually. And I saw that, like, I think our different herbal courses have quite high dropout rates sometimes because people are like, they think it's going to be just this like wonderful outdoor adventure. And then actually it's like, wow, like learning about biochemistry is like fucking hard. And, learning all these, mechanisms of drugs and pharmaceuticals and how they interact with plant constituents, like, whoa, this isn't what I was expecting. So it's like, you can also just sign up for something and then be like, this isn't really for me. Or, you'll learn something about your learning style. So anyway, this is much longer than I expected to talk about it, but I think it is so foundational. It's just knowing yourself, knowing your needs and your desires, knowing your capacity, which can change. We can expand our sort of nervous systems, like ability to kind of cope with things, and, things that are challenging don't have to necessarily be stressful. Like training didn't necessarily put me in a big kind of fight or flight response because I love learning so much and it was so joyful for me. And the kind of workaholism tendencies of distracting from all the stuff was really pleasurable. But yeah, just kind of like reflect on where you're at and what you need and what courses are likely compatible with you. Ideally before jumping in or spending lots of money or, embarking on something. Okay, so I'm not going to go into lots of depth about all the options because it would be endless podcasts about endless programs. And I'm aware that lots of people listen to this who aren't just in like England, Wales or Scotland, for example. But I will talk about like some of the main sort of schools or options to learn, and then a couple of my favorites from the so-called US. But yeah, there are many, many, many more beside these. And I wanted to kind of keep this stuff like a little bit broader than that. But I think to give what I'm going to say more context, I think it's useful for you to know like the different things. So for example, unfortunately, a lot of the herbal medicine degree programs at universities have closed down over the years. I don't know why that is, other than potential funding and prejudice and things like this, but it has really reduced the options and the flexibility for people wanting to kind of really undertake herbalism as a kind of like clinical herbalist path. So for example, I think in the UK, like the only degree program left is Lincoln University, and I know they have part-time options as well. And I've met like a bunch of people who've been to Lincoln, a couple have come to Calais, and I do think they have been like really fantastic herbalists in terms of, I think all the kind of diagnosis stuff is like very thorough. People are often quite confident kind of clinically or like medically. I think maybe people have felt frustrated about the lack of practical things on the course, but I do think that is like one of the things that you can like quite easily learn on your own or learn elsewhere. Does that make sense? So I think it is quite a sort of strong course. Obviously it involves living up there, or, you know, go in part-time so that you can travel to university. I'm actually speaking with inaccuracy here because I don't know for sure how their program is structured, but so please check out their website in case I've just like told you a load of nonsense. So yeah, so the degree is obviously, you know, with degrees, like you can get loans and things, but they're obviously like very kind of, you know, huge bodies of things to enroll in. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's definitely an option, and you know, a great one if that's for you. And then there is an organization called Heartwood, which I think a lot of people have heard of. So they offer clinical herbalism training, which is accredited by the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, which are like the main body in the so-called UK that a kind of herbalists can register with. And I'm currently creating another online course at the moment called Do No Harm, about like safe practice, you know, in projects like Cali and stuff. And yeah, I talk about some of the frameworks around people that are pro statutory regulation, being regulated by the state, kind of formal professional bodies, you know, some of the strengths of that in terms of codes of ethics and standards of practice and like sort of rigorous curriculums and things, and then also like some of the weaknesses of that. But anyway, so yeah, so if you want to be an accredited herbalist, like basically in the UK, like herbalism isn't regulated. Some people have been fighting for regulation, and if you're one of those people, I doubt you've been listening to this podcast, because you'll know that I'm an anarchist and I'm trying to build a world without the state. So I definitely don't want a kind of profession that's got thousands of years of practice and, you know, embeddedness in communities to be something that becomes the monopoly of people that have only had a certain form of education. Anyway, that is like another massive podcast side note. But what I'm trying to say is, for some people, it is actually really important to them that they are accredited, in the sense that they have like registration with the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, and that, you know, maybe they also want a degree so that they can go on to do like further master's degrees or PhDs. Like some people just know from the get-go that they want to go down the sort of research ethnobotany type route. So rock and roll if that's you. But yeah, Heartwood offer a course that is accredited by NIM, this National Institute of Medical Herbalists. And yeah, I've met like a lot of Heartwood graduates, and yeah, it's been a lot of mixed reviews. I think people value a lot of the content, and think it's incredibly thorough, but I think there is like, and I'm probably going to offend and upset people here, but like a little bit of a like kind of macho grueling atmosphere of like a huge volume of work, a lot of deadlines, you have to just fucking grin and bear it. Maybe not that much student support from what I've heard, but this is just herbal rumors. So I do not want to cause them a disservice, because I'm sure other people have had really fantastic experiences with them. But it is a flexible program in terms of being able to, you know, study at home, and you have to do like a whole bunch of clinical hours, like at least 500 clinical hours. So you have to go to clinics and kind of apprentice with clinical herbalists. But yeah, most of the kind of education is what you're doing on your own, but it's like highly structured. So it's like you have to do this by this point. And yeah, for some of my friends, they really value that, and they really need that to get stuff done. So that is for them. That is 100% not for me. It's literally unbearable for me to have to do something by a certain date for someone else. But anyway, but yeah, I have heard mixed reviews, but I've also, a lot of people, you know, are just kind of cracking on with it, and it has been expansive for them in terms of learning herbalism and introduce them to whole worlds of herbalism stuff, and, you know, are a bit more kind of clinically confident. Yeah. So, and then there's Botanica, which again, and I really I don't want someone to choose between these programs based on what I'm saying, because I'm getting like very limited, sneaky bits of testimonial from people who studied with them. And you know what people are like you're more likely to complain about something if you've had a negative experience than you are to say like, oh, this was really wonderful for me. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I have met a few Botanica graduates. And again, I think the course is like very demanding in terms of, lessons and assignments and things. But unlike Heartwood, you are sort of getting together in a physical location and like learning together over a weekend. So coming back to that like self-education, like learning style reflection, if you're someone that really benefits from a group environment, from seeing things live, from being able to ask questions, from watching people do things, I think Botanica is like a really great option for people that are like, yeah, that's their kind of like kinesthetic kind of practical learning style. So I don't know how long their program is, maybe 4 years, but again, check out their website, speak to people who've studied with them. And then, I trained with the plant medicine school, which at the time were only based in Ireland. And they now have schools based in Exmoor and Somerset, as well as in Scotland. So, and I know that the program has radically developed over the years since I graduated. So I think there's probably even more sort of like taught content. Sorry, my laptop crashed again. Yeah, so I think there is more like taught kind of content. So when and the kind of last half of the training for me was like when the pandemic started, and so the school had to kind of like everyone just like rapidly adapt and move online, which for me was actually really beneficial because I was spending a lot of money like traveling to Ireland on the ferry with my camper van, and that, we use to the clinic and stuff now. And yeah, it was like a lot, if that makes sense. So I was kind of like very appreciative when all the sort of lectures got put online and got recorded. And but even before then, there was like a lot of information. But for me, like the school had like the perfect mix of sort of like what I call like liberating structure. So there was like areas of focus of like, like shitloads of assignments you needed to do, and, like clinical training weeks where you're learning a bunch of practical skills. But like there was so much freedom to, and I don't know if this is the same now, like maybe it's different. So again, like check out their prospectus and everything now. But like for me, I really felt like it was a school where it was like you are actually just kind of treated like an adult of like, okay, it's the skin this month. Here's like a few handouts on the skin. Go and learn about it, and then can you do these 3 assignments about herbal support for eczema or psoriasis or whatever. And it was like, for me, that was like so fucking perfect because I could then go and watch a bunch of like YouTube videos about, black skin and dermatology. And then I could read about, herbs from this thing. And then I could work on my assignment. And I just like loved that freedom, and it really suited me. But I do know that that really doesn't suit other people. And other graduates are just a bit like, whoa, there's just like not enough content here. Like there's not enough like taught stuff. Like they felt like the anatomy and physiology stuff just wasn't there or whatever. But this is like several years ago. So I think things have changed now. Whereas for me, I would have my anatomy and physiology like coloring book and textbooks and Davidson's medicine and stuff. And I would just like dive in deep with that, like just autonomously. Like I didn't give a shit if a tutor was going to look at it or not. So this is what I mean by just like reflecting on your learning style is so important. So for example, we had to do like several assignments, and like when I worked for Corporate Watch, like I did a bunch of overtime and like moved my hours around and then used my holiday hours. I mean, I only worked like 3 days a week with them, but it meant like the whole of the February one year, I just did assignments. And I did like 8 assignments in a row, and I just got like completely in it with like getting up, studying, writing all the formats, and like that just worked for me. Like, it worked for me so much. Like, I could go with my energy, I could go with my bloody menstrual cycle, I could go with like stuff needed in campaigns and prison visits and other things. But still know that as long as I had completed all of these things before I took my clinical exam, that I'm okay, you know? And I really loved that things weren't like marked in the sense that they weren't giving like, hey, you got an A, or you've got like 93%, or like, you know, like I'm an anarchist. Like, I've read a lot about, you know, like pedagogy and Freire and popular education and like all of this stuff. And like, I do find like this kind of like grading model like quite oppressive, and I'm just not up for it anymore. I'm too I'm too old. Like, I'm just not in that world. So for me, it was like so great that I could submit an assignment, and my tutor Jane, who is like fucking wonderful human, like super caring, loads of life experience, like used to do a lot of stuff with people with like different kind of mental health challenges, and just had so much herbal knowledge, but was so humble. And like, she could just send the assignment back and be like, what about this, this, and this? Or like, oh, you've missed this. And then I would like edit it and send it back to her, and she'd be like, brilliant. And like, I just love that. And like, there was so much flexibility with the clinical hours. So like, you could do like online clinics with various herbalists, and they were just fucking amazing. Like Marie Riley in Ireland, Joe Goodyear in Ireland, Jane as well, Jane Woolwork, who I just mentioned. Like, I just felt like I had found this treasure chest of amazing women with so much knowledge, who were actually really down to earth. Like, I remember being in Ireland and going to a clinic with Marie Riley, and this patient had come in and they had a bunch of stuff going on. And then Marie was just like, yeah, she's like a single parent. Like, she's stressed. Like, of course she's going to have this, this, and this. And it just felt like so refreshing of like someone actually is like acknowledging this kind of like class stuff a bit, you know? So anyway, so yeah, my experience with the plant medicine school was like really fantastic, in the sense of like, I could be really autonomous. I knew the assignments I needed to do. The clinical hours were super flexible. Like, I said to Jane, like, I don't want to put the people that are approaching me for support in like my final months before graduation, like, I don't want them to be in a room with like 20 students on Zoom, like for people that, you know, had left prison or were on methadone or, you know, whatever. So like, I gave her a little bit extra money, like not much, but she would be up for doing like one-to-one stuff with me. So then I could support someone who had experienced a lot more sort of trauma one-to-one with Jane there, like observing me for my clinical hours. And I could also use my time in Calais as a field coordinator, as also part of my clinical hours. So that was fantastic. And yeah, I just loved the like freedom and the flexibility. I know, like, with any course you do, you're going to grade up against certain teachers. You're going to be frustrated with certain political worldviews they have. You know, like, I'm a white, like, cis bisexual woman. Like, I'm not in that class feeling majorly alienated. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it's felt for the students of colour. I mean, I think we only had one person of colour in our group in Ireland, for example. So yeah, I'm just totally talking about my own experiences. And I think, yeah, everyone's going to have a different experience. And, you know, people may have had encounters that have felt problematic, or, you know, where they've had to challenge like racism or ableism, or you know, kind of biological determinism around sex and gender and stuff. So yeah, I'm not walking into a space thinking that everyone's going to be sort of some perfect anarchist, and, you know, but I'm walking into a space hoping that they're open to feedback and learning and improving the course. And yeah, and I kind of felt like that the plant medicine school were, in terms of, you know, like Nikki, the main sort of director of the school, like, you know, she got loads of prisoners' herbals from me to send to people in prison in Ireland, and like was really supportive of that book and that project. And like, I never felt judged, and I loved that. Like, I loved that they knew about my history, but they were like welcoming. And after my experiences with Nim, like, it felt so different. And I actually felt like they were sort of like comrades, if that makes sense. Like, they would make medicine for Calais or donate and share things. And like, I don't know, it just felt like more kind of like homely and intimate. But anyway, so that was my experience with the plant medicine school. But it's a lot. It's like 3,500 hours or something of learning. And, you have to do at least 500 clinical hours, and it's 4 years. And like, yeah, it's a lot of graft. Like, it's a lot of work, but it was really wonderful for me. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful for them. Okay. And then, yeah, I think I'm going to stop this bit here. So those are the kind of main schools in the sort of England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland. I'm really sorry if I've forgotten any others. And I know that in the so-called US, there's like 1,000,001 other options. So I'm going to talk about those next in terms of like continual professional development, if that makes sense, and kind of ongoing learning.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityApothecary.org/podcast.